Hey, what's up everybody? Today we will create a full Flutter application. Basically this will be a two-part tutorial. So in the first part we will learn how to create a prototype of a full application using mock data and mock functionality, how to use different kinds of built-in widget to create a complete application, how to use state using the provider third-party library, how to use another library that is called UUID to generate random ID, and how to use charts to show our data. So in the first part you will learn everything about this, and in the second part we will implement more functionality. So let me show you the demo first. So in this tutorial we are developing a board application prototype. So when you open the app you will see a launch screen with two buttons. So if you click any of this button, a proper sign-in should occur, but in this episode we are not integrated any Firebase authentication. We will integrate that in the next episode. So in the home screen you will see all of the votes available which user can vote. So here user must have to select any of the vote to go to the next screen, and here you will see we are using a stepper widget. If I click continue, you will see as I did not select any of this, so there is a alert showing. So I must have to select an option. So suppose I am selecting best mobile framework and I click continue, and then based on best mobile framework the option we can see in this screen on the vote screen. So here also you must have to select an option. If you do not select and just click continue, you will see the alert. So suppose I am selecting Flutter and click continue, then I move to the result screen where you will see a chart. So if you now click this home button, then you will also go to the front screen. Also today's episode code you will find in my GitHub repository, that is Flutter_Firebase_board. You will find this link in the description below. Here you will see all the code and some widget that we already use in this application, and also the third-party libraries link. The target audience for this tutorial is to beginner to intermediate Flutter developers. So if you know basics of Flutter application development framework, if you know Dart programming language, then you can understand this tutorial and you can follow with me. If you want to get the most out from this tutorial, you should type the code yourself with me. If you do not want to type the code, you can just copy the code from my GitHub repository. But I prefer that you should type the code yourself, otherwise you will forget many concepts later. So let's create a new Flutter project. Now remove all the code, only leave the import statement and the main functions. So I am expanding the vote directory, then leave, and here in the main.dart I am removing all the myapp class, and also I want to create a new class. So that will be stateless widget, and the widget name will be vote app. And now I copy this vote app and paste it in the run app section. Now let's define a constant.dart file where we define some constant information. So here new, then so here we want to define the app name as a constant. And now let's import this in the main.dart file. Alright, now let's create 3 screens, and when I normally create an application, I create an sketch. So normally I use Notability app to create a screen. So here in the Notability app you see the dummy screen. So we need a launch screen and a home screen where basically you will see the vote and can vote, and finally a result screen. So for this I want to create a directory in the lib directory, and the directory name will be screens. So all the main screens will be stayed in this directory. So here I want to create three new Dart file. So the first file name is home_screen.dart. The second file will be the launch screen, and the third file will be the result screen. Now let's come on the main.dart file and create a material app widget with some routes defining. So here remove this container, and instead of the container let's use the material app widget. So I am giving the initial route forward slash. Then I also want to define some routes here. So this launch screen yet not defined, so let's define this launch screen in the launch_screen.dart file. So I want to create a stateless widget here, and the widget name will be launch screen, and here in the top I want to import the material. Alright, so now copy this first statement, the import statement, and paste in other screen like home screen and result screen. So let's in the home screen create another widget. So the home screen widget name will be also home screen. So in this case I also want to define a we basically need a stateful widget for the home screen. So stateful, and I am giving the name home screen. And now come to the result screen and define a stateless widget here. So stateless, and the widget name will be result screen. So if we define our widget name using class keyword, then in the main.dart we can access that. So here if I now just retype again launch screen, you will see that the package or the library will automatically import it. So our first route will be the launch screen that I mentioned in the initial route. Now for the home screen I want to mention another route, home, and let's define another route for the result screen. So basically we define all the three routes. So the first route, the forward slash or the initial route, is the launch screen. The second route home for the home screen, and the third route will be the result screen. And here we are just using in the first screen or launch screen we do not need the app bar, that's why we do not mention the app bar here. But for the other screen like home screen and result screen we also need the app bar, so that we define in there. Now let's define our launch screen, which is the initial screen. So currently it's written in container widget. So in the container widget let's define a width 400, and the margin should be edge inset all 20, and let's define a column here. And in the column let's define the cross axis alignment in the center, so that the login button should be in the center place. Cross axis alignment center. So now in the children let's define a text for the title. So child, no child. So basically for this we need to create a container, and in the container let's define a child and give a text. Text should be the app name, and give a style for the text. That would be font size 40. Give a font weight bold, and give a color to accent. All right, so now if I just save this thing and if I run our current app, so that we want to see the update, you can use any emulator. So if you prefer, you can use Android emulator. If you are using Windows, then you cannot use iOS emulator, but as I am using Mac, so I am using the iOS emulator, as I already installed the Xcode in my Mac. So you are seeing the launch screen here, and you see that Vote app is at the very top. It does not look good, so let's give a margin top side. So margin edge inset only in the top. Let's define 100, and now the app title looks better. All right, so now we need to give two button here in this place. If you see our mockup, that we need two button, one is Google sign in, another one is anonymous. So let's define this two button. So for this two button, basically I want to define a new widget, and I want, or maybe in future if I want, I can reuse that widget. So that's why I want to define that widget in a shared widget classes. So in the lib directory, let's create a new directory, and the directory name will be widgets. So all our widgets or custom widgets we will define in here, so that it's easy to manage. Okay, so here let's define or create a new file. The file name is shared widget. So here in the shared widget, let's define a new widget which we can use in the launch screen. So our new widget name will be the login button. Class login button extends stateless widget. So in this login button, let's define some properties. For example, in the login button we need a label, right? So let's define a property label. Also we need a size for the button, so let's define a size using double. And when we create this button, we want to pass some values as parameter, so let's define a default constructor. This dot label, this dot size equal to 300. So if there is no size is provided, the default size will be 300, and this dot on pressed. So let's define another function here, function on pressed. So basically what the functionality for the login button will be, that function we will pass, and that function will be used in here, and we will use this on pressed to refer that function which will be provided in using this login button default constructor. So let's define this build function or build method. So here remove this null and use a container, and for the width we will use this size, and for the child we are going to use the material button. So in the material button we want to give the height for this button is 60. Also we want to give some padding, .0, and we want to give some colors, blue accent 200, and we also want to give a child, and the child is a text, and text label is the label, text title will be the label that will be provided externally, and let's define some style. And also for this material button there is a on pressed event. We want to just use the on pressed function that will be provided externally. And finally what we want, the button should be a bit rounded corner. Okay, so to do that we want to use the shape property. So rounded rectangle border, and for the border radius we want to give 10. Border radius circular, border radius circular, and we want to provide the value 10. And let's save this thing. So there is a error or something is showing. Let's do this. Oh, my app is not found. Okay, so here in the test directory, the widget underscore test, you see that it is trying to use my app, but we do not have my app, we have vote app. So if I save this thing, that will error will be gone, and a function body must be provided is mentioning here. So what's the problem? Let's see. Oh, I need a semicolon here. All right, so that the parameter on press is required. On press is required. Okay, so here basically we are using a icon button, but we did not give any on pressed event. That's why this warning is showing. So let's give a in the icon button, let's define an on pressed event. So on pressed event, I just want to use a print statement that result is screen. Later we will remove this. Okay, so our warnings are gone, and now we can see the updated result. So now come to the launch screen and add that login button widget here. So here in the children of this column widget, we want to add the login button, which we define in our shared widget. So I just use this login button, and we want to pass a label that Google sign in. We also want to define a on pressed that, and currently we have nothing, so we just put a curly braces, and we also want to define another login button, and that another will be anonymous sign in, and on press nothing. So if I save this, you will see these two buttons are showing here, but it doesn't look good. So let's give some space here. So before this login button, let's use a sized box widget, and give a height 200.0. This is basically an invisible widget. You see here, you will see nothing. This size box just is an invisible widget. So, and give another size box here, sized box height, and in this time we want to use 10. All right, so the launch screen now looks good. Okay, but there are basically no functionality for these two buttons. So let's define a function here. So outside of this build method, let's define a function void sign in, and also we need the variable build context. And here what we want to do, we want to use the navigator classes push replacement named widget named method, where we have to pass this context and the route name. So here we want to use the home route, which we define in our main.dart file. Here we defined a home route. So from the launch screen in the sign in method, when we call this push replacement name method of the navigator class, and we use this sign in here. So suppose first in here sign in and pass the context, and also copy this sign in here, and now save this. Now if I click Google sign in or anonymous sign in, suppose I click Google sign in, we will see that we are moving to our home screen. Okay, so this is the mock functionality, but in next episode we will integrate the real Firebase authentication here. Alright, so our launch screen is done. Now let's move on our home screen. So in the home screen, basically we need to see the list of vote, and when user click a vote, we want to see the option for that vote. So at the top we want to use a stepper widget. So in the container, let's use a column widget, as we want to put something vertically, and at the first child we want to use a stepper widget. So here let's put it stepper, and this stepper widget needs some steps and some mandatory property. The first property we want is to give stepper type horizontal, and also we need to provide the steps. So here we are providing a list, and for the step we can use a step class like this. There is a step widget, so where you have to put the title. So for this title I want to type choose, then content. For this content I just type random data or something dot, and then here in the choose I have to use the text widget basically, and in the isActive widget isActive property I have to give a value true or false based on the situation. So if I save this thing, and you see there is an error is showing that render flex children have non-zero flex but incoming height constraint are unbound. So basically somehow this situation cannot, the render engine cannot define the height. To solve this, let's use an expanded widget here. So put your mouse pointer here and click Alt Enter or Option Enter, and here just give expanded this widget, and if save this, you see now this step widget is showing. Alright, so but basically it's a very minimal thing, but we need two step widget. So instead of using this, let's define a method outside of this build context. Okay, so the method name will be get step, and that will return a step widget. So I am mentioning step here because it will return a step widget. So get step, and here I want to pass some parameters. The first parameter will be the title, second parameter will be the widget, the child, and bool is active with a default value false. Now let's return this step, return a new step here, and for the title I want to use the text title, and for the content I want to use this child which will be provided from our main area, and here for the isActive we want to use this isActive. Alright, so our get step is done. Now use this get step instead of this step raw code. Okay, so here we want to use the get step method. So in the get step method we want to pass the value. So for example, the title will be choose, then child will be at this moment the child will be a simple text, but I will return a real widget later. So for example, now I just write something dot and isActive is true. Let's save this thing. You see there is no change, it's still working. Now copy this get step function and paste it here, and now here instead of choose let's use vote. So basically we need two step, choose and vote, and here isActive, suppose let's give it false, and let's save it. So sometimes when you do something like this, you will see some kind of error. Sometimes if we restart the application, the error will be gone. So let's restart the application, and I click anonymous login. You see now there is no problem, it's working without any issue. So basically we define two steps. So let's define some other property. So the first thing, to use a stepper widget, you have to determine that at what step you are currently in. So to do that, let's define a property in our state, home screen state, and the property name will be the current step, int current step, and which will be 0 at the initially, and the step number start from 0, 1, 2, like this way, like a list index. Okay, and now the step, normally if I click here or if I click continue, nothing is happening. Okay, so we have to define some more method. So the first thing we need to do is that after this stepper type dot horizontal this thing, and let's give a comma here so that it looks automatically formatted. Anyway, so here let's give a current step property where we want to use this current step, and let's save this thing. And now let's define on step continue and on step cancel function. So inside here, after this brackets, use on step continue and on step cancel. So if I want, now you see that when we define these two method here, the continue now become enable. So if I click, it basically does nothing. So let's define this on step continue. So we want to use the set state method, and here we want to increment the current step. And one thing you have to make sure that when you want to increment the current step, that means you want to move the content from here to this step. So, and this step should be active to true. So here we need an if condition. So here the condition is current step greater than or equal to 1, then it's true, otherwise it's false. Now save this thing and click continue. You see now it is showing vote 2. So let's define something here different, vote content, and let's save this thing, rerun the application. So click any button. Now we are in the first step. If I click continue, you see now we are moving to the next step. Another thing you will notice here, that if I am now currently at step, current step is 1. So if I click continue again, it will show an error because we have only 2 steps, but we want to try to access step 3, but there is no third steps we provided. So here we need to fix that, we need to make a condition here. So current step equal to a condition that current step plus 1, if it greater than 1 then 1, otherwise current step plus 1. So if I save this thing, rerun the program again, and if I click continue, it is in step 1, and if I click continue, there is no such error. So our problem is gone. So now also let's define the cancel step, so that if I click cancel, it goes to the previous step. So here also I want to use a similar condition, that current step, here is current step minus 1, if less than 0 then it will be 0, otherwise current step minus 1. So let's save this thing, and if I click cancel, you see now I move to the first step or step 0. If I click cancel again, there is no error. So it's basically working. So in the choose section, we want to show some vote options. Okay, so to do that we need to model something. So now we will create a vote model. So here I want to show you how it will look like. So for example, think about this: a vote has a vote ID, a vote title, and some option. And one thing we want to do, that for the option we are using map. So inside a list we want to use map. So in the map the key will be the option name. For example, what is the best mobile framework, and here the some options are Flutter, React Native and Xamarin. And as the value we are using map inside a list, so as the value we are counting the how many people vote for that option. Basically we are just doing that, and for simplicity we are storing the option and vote result in the same data. Okay, so at first now let's define a model first. So here let's close these things, launch screen, and here in the lib directory create another directory. The directory name will be models, and here in the models let's create a class. The file name is vote.dart, and here let's create the model. So our first model name will be the vote, class vote. And as I said that I also want to open that yes, okay. So the first there should be a vote ID for this vote model. So let's define a vote ID and a vote title, and we want to define this, okay, as an option. So here list, and inside list options, and inside list there will be a mapping. So map string int. So the option name will be string and the vote result will be as a integer. Okay, and let's define a default constructor for this class. This dot vote ID, alright. So our vote model is done. So let's define another class which we will not be using now but maybe in future, class voter. So the person who will vote, so there will be UUID, a vote ID, and marked voted vote option. So basically this voter will be the person who will vote, and we will store this result in the server in our next episode. Maybe this class we will change a bit later, but in this episode or in this tutorial we are going to use this vote model. So we want to create and use some dummy data or mock data for our prototype. So normally when I use internet to retrieve some data over REST API or any other API, I create a separate file. So in this case we will do the same. So here in the lib directory let's create a new file, service.dart, where we will basically use the network related tasks. But right now we do not use any server data, will create some mock data. Okay, so here in the mock data we will need a get vote list function, get vote list, which will return a list of vote, and here we will basically define the mock data. All right, and here at the first property inside this function let's define a variable vote list and an empty vote. All right, so we define an empty list here, and let's import this vote, import package, our app name vote, then model, then vote. All right, so our error is gone. So inside this function we define an empty list of that name is vote list. So now what we need, as I told you before, that we need a vote ID. So we want to use a third-party library that is called UUID. Let me show you. So here if I search UUID, here at the top you will see this UUID. So basically I used this package long ago in JavaScript based application. So I found a similar library in Dart, so you can use that. So here we will use that, and using the method it basically generate random ID, so which we will use for the vote ID. So let's install this thing. So here copy this UUID, this part, and come to your pubspec.yml, and after Cupertino icons paste it here and click package get. So now we can use that in our service.dart. So let's import this thing. Import package UUID.dart here. Okay, so let's add some mock data. So vote list dot add. So here what we want to add, we want to add a vote instance. Okay, so for the vote instance we need to pass some ID. So we have to define UUID dot version 4. So it will return a random ID, then vote title, best mobile frameworks, asking user a question, and the options. So option basically a list where we are using mapping. So for map, for the key at the first option I want to use Flutter and provide a random data. So here Flutter 70 means that this is a mock data that 70 people voted for Flutter. Okay, so but basically this will be initially 0, and when user really vote we will update this in the server in our next episode. Okay, now copy this 3 thing. Here a copy, here another copy. Okay, all right, so here it is showing an error. Why it is showing error? Let me see. It is showing a set. All right, dart analysis, the type set object can be assigned to the list type map. So I did a mistake here. It will be a colon because we are using map. And let's copy this thing, this line, and paste 2 more times. Here use React Native 10 on marine. All right, so our mock data is done. When we will call this get vote list function from our app, we will get this vote list, and I have to a return option statement here, return vote list. All right, so we will get this mock data, but in real scenario we will replace this code to call a network request to retrieve actual data. Now we want to define state. Okay, so for this application we are going to use the provider state management library. So let's go to the code repository, and here you will see the provider link. So here go to the install section, copy this provider dependency, come your pubspec.yml and paste it after UUID, save this file and click package as get. So now you can use provider state library in your application. So you have done enough coding. Now take 5-minute break, drink some coffee and come back later. So here for the state management we will create another directory in the lib directory. The directory name will be state, where we have to define a new file. The file name is vote.dart, and here basically we define the vote state. So basically in the vote state we want to store the vote list and user, what vote user give, like this. So this kind of information, that's why we want to define a separate state, and the name is the vote state. So let's define a class vote state, and this we are using provider, so we have to use the change notifier here, and we are using a mixin change notifier in this vote state class. All right, so let's import some other files. So the first file is import package material dot dart, then import models package vote models vote, and then import package vote service dot dart. Okay, so basically we need these three library. One is the Flutter framework library, another two we defined. All right, so here in the change notifier, let's define an empty vote list vote vote list vote and empty vote. And we also need two other property, active vote selected option in vote. So basically vote list, where we will retrieve the vote list from the server and use in here. And then active vote is that when users select a particular vote, that vote will be saved in here, active vote. And when for that active vote user mark an option, that option will be saved in here, so that from this state we can access every of these. So let's define a function here, void load vote list, and here we want to use this vote list, and we want to call this get vote list for now. Okay, so get vote list, and also notify listeners. We also want to define other method like clear state. So when the state is clear, what we want to do, so void clear state, and here we want to give active vote equal to null, selected option equal to null. And then we need to define some getter method. Okay, so list vote get vote list, basically it will return the vote list, and similarly vote get active vote, it will return active vote, and finally string get selected. Copy this part, paste it here, and arrow. Okay, so this getter function basically return these variables, which is by as we are providing underscore, so it looks private in here. So basically this getter function vote list active vote and selected option in active vote will return the following properties. All right, so let's define some setter properties. Set active vote, so we will pass if we want to set, we want to use active vote equal to new value, and we want to notify listeners. Similarly void set selected, copy this part again, setter string new value selected new value, notify listener. So our all getter and setter functions are defined in this vote state class. So far we defined our vote model, we defined a function to create mock data, and we create a state, okay, using provider. So when you want to use provider, you have to change something in your main file. So let's open the main file, and here let's import the state and the provider library. So here at the top I want to import package provider.dart file, and also I want to import package vote, then state, and our vote.dart file. All right, so now here instead of return material app, click alter enter and new widget. Here use multi provider widget, and in the multi provider pass the providers. So here we want to change notifier provider, where we have to give a builder method which pass a context, but we do not need that context, so we just want to use the vote state here. Okay, so currently we are only defining this vote state, so we want to use this vote state in our widget, but when we will define some other state, for example authentication state, then we will add that state in here in this providers list. So our main file modification is done. Let's create a new widget, that is vote list widget, which we will show in here based on our mock data. So in the widget directory, let's create a new file, a dart file, and the file name will be vote underscore list dot dart, and here let's define a widget. So before do that, let's import some file, import package. Okay, so now let's define the class. It will be stateless widget. Basically the widget name is vote list widget. So now let's define this build method. So we are using the provider state management library, so we need to consume the data from here. Our where is our state here? Okay, so here there is a vote list, and we will basically call this load vote list from somewhere in our home screen. I will show you later, and when that will be called, our state will contain the vote list, and in our vote list widget we want to build that as a widget. Okay, so let's do that. So we need consumer widget, consumer, where in the consumer we have to mention the type. We want to use the vote state for here, and let's define the builder method. So in the builder method we can get context, then state name, instance, and a child. Okay, so return, we want to use the column widget. So here in the children, so let's search, let's loop over the vote list. So to do that, let's use a for variable for vote in vote state dot vote list, and here let's use a card widget. And you see there is a gray color underline is showing that basically this is a version related issue. You have to use minimum 2.2.2. so just come to the pubspec.yml, and here in the SDK just change this 2.2.2. so it reruns again and come to this here and close this file. All right, so okay, so here use a card statement, use a card widget, and in the card widget use a child property, and in the child let's give a list style widget. For the title use a container, so that you can use a padding, and give some padding for the content age, insets all, give font 15.0, then give child, use a text in the container, and for the text it will be vote title, and give some style, text style, font size give 18, and for the color suppose give some color dot white, or the text we need colors dot black basically. Okay, so basically our vote list widget is partially done, so let's add this thing in here so that it looks nice. Okay, so now come to our home screen, and here in the init state define an init state and remove this comment. So basically here is an issue you have to remember. So in our state we define load vote list, but when I created the first demo myself, I found that if I call this function from here, our home screen, there are some kind of weird error shown. So I then check the documentation of the provider, and here I found something that init state, you have to come at bottom, init state, I use change. All right, here. So here they said that you have to do something asynchronously at the end of the frame. So in the init state, you have to use a future.microtask, and in the function you will call should be an asynchronous function. So to do that, here what I have to do, just come here in the state.vote, and in the load vote list, here just mark this function as asynchronous function so that it will return a future. Okay, and here in the home screen, just use this future.microtask, this method of the future class. So just copy this thing from here and come after init state, come here and write a comment for future reference loading votes and call this function. And instead of here, we need to import the provider library first. Import package provider.dart, then also we need to import package vote models vote, and we also need the state, import package vote state vote. All right, so now here for the state we have to use vote state, context is okay, and here just call load vote list, and also okay, and also just give a listen false. We do not want to when the notify listener will call, we do not want to listen it here next time. Okay, basically when the home screen widget will created, the init state will call every time. So this loading votes or this future.microtask will be called in here. And another thing we want to do, we want to use here, instead of use the arrow function, use curly braces, because we are defining more than one statement. So before calling this, we also want to use the clear state method. Okay, so clear state method. So basically when you complete the vote part and you come to the home screen, we need to clear the state. That's why we call this clear state method in here at the top, and then we will load the vote list. Now come to here our choose, and here in the child let's call the vote list widget, and let's save this thing and rerun the program. Click any sign in. You see now it is showing best mobile framework, best web front-end framework, and this data is coming from our provider, that is we define in the state vote state. Okay, now if I click, you see nothing is happened because I need to define some more functionality. So let's update this vote list widget here. So at first I want to give some color as the background. So here in the color section, so card or the list style should have color. Let's see. Okay, so the list style we can provide some color. For example, if I want to give suppose colors dot red and 200 shade, you see all becomes red, but we do not want this color. Okay, we want different color like teal 100 shade, that is, you see it looks like this. But normally when there are different type of option in some application, I saw that they use different color or at least two different color. So now let's I also want to do that, so let's define a function here. Okay, outside of this build method, the function, and this function basically here I am using the concept of closure. So the function name is get alternate, and this get alternate has an optional value in start and default value is 0. And this function, this get alternate function basically will return another function. So before that I want to define the index num variable where I can pass this start variable. So the index num will be initially 0. and let's define another function, color get color. So here I want to define a variable color equal to colors dot till the initial value, and then I check if index num mod 2 equal to 0, but that means if index num is even number, then color will be colors blue accent 100. So for odd number I want to use the default color, that is teal color, otherwise I want to use for even number blue accent. Okay, and then after the if condition I want to just update the index num variable, and finally in this variable I want to return the color, and after this function get color I want to return this function get color. So this concept is called closure. Basically this index num variable we cannot access from outside, but this get color is closed over this variable. So that means basically this variable is exist with this get color function. So this is a functional programming approach. If you do not know what is closure or how to use closure, if you need more information, just write in the comment. I will create a short video tutorial to know how to use closure or what is closure. Anyway, so here we define a closure get alternate, and let's define a variable here in the build method. So here, sorry, in the build method, yes, here. So here I want to define the function alternate color, the function name alternate color, and I want to use the get alternate, and I just want to pass the value 0. So every time this build method is called, it will be start 0. So basically this value is optional because I already provided default value there anyway. So now let's define the alternate color here. So here we remove this part and use alternate color and just call this function. Now save this. You see now it looks different. So the first two is blue and the even number is blue accent, the odd number is teal accent. So 0 1 2, okay, as the number start from 0. Anyway, so now the color looks okay, but if I click nothing happens. So I want to implement that feature as well. So let's do that in here. So so here we need to add two property. One is the on tap property. On tap will be list style here. On tap. Okay. So in the when user will click this on tap, what we want to do, in our state there is an active vote. Okay, so we want to use our active vote by replacing the vote user is click here. Basically these three are three different vote options, right? So if user click this one, we want to add that thing in here in the active vote in the state. So here in the curly braces, let's do that. Provider dot off angle bracket vote state context dot active vote equals vote. So where this vote comes from? This vote comes from here because all this thing is under this loop, so we can access that vote in here. And now we need to define another property, that is selected property. So the selected property means that whether a list style is in selected state or not. So by default it is false. So let's make it true with some condition. So before do that, let's define another variable at the top. Okay, so here after this alternate color, let's define a variable string active vote id equal to provider of vote state context active vote, and we will use null aware operator here. So question mark dot then vote id otherwise empty. So basically null our operator here means that if active vote is not null, then use that active vote object vote id, otherwise double question mark is also null operator. That means if this is null, then use this empty string in here, active vote id. Okay, so now here in the selected, let's define the selected property that if active vote id equal to vote dot vote id, then true, otherwise false. Now save this thing, and if I click now, you see still nothing is happening. So let's rerun this program and come here. Okay, so basically our active vote id is updated, but we did not update the color. So here we have to update the color. So active vote id equal to vote dot vote id, then colors dot red 200 shade, otherwise alternate color. So now when I save this, you see this become red color because it is in selected state. So if I click this one, this become red, this one become red. So it's working. So another thing we want that when a if the list style is clicked or selected state, the text color become white. Okay, we want that. So let's do that in here. So here in the color, text style color, let's update the condition that active vote id equal to vote dot vote id, then colors dot white, otherwise colors dot black, and save this thing. Also we want to use the font weight here, so similar condition. So you see the font become bold when I selected any list. So basically our vote list widget is done. So now what we want to do, suppose I restart this application, a new application is running, a user is login, and if I click continue, I am going to the next screen, but it should not happen because I did not select any of these vote option. So let's write some more code in our home screen so that we can make sure that before going to the next screen or the vote screen, user must select any of the vote. Okay, so let's write some code for that. So here I want to define another function. That function name is bool step to required. Okay, so this function basically return true or false based on the situation. So let's write an if condition. So this step to required function basically checking that if the active vote is null, then it returns just false. So basically we are getting this active vote through our state. Okay, so here in the vote state you will see there is active vote. So when user select an active vote, if you check the vote list widget, you will see that there is an on tap method where we are basically assigning the vote user is selected to the state. But if user do not select any vote, then that will be null. Okay, that active vote will be null. So here we are checking that if active vote is null, return false, otherwise return true. Now here in the on step continue, let's update the code so that we make sure that before moving to the next step, user must have to select a vote. So here let's write the code. Alright, so here we write the code that if the current step equal to 0, that means I am make suring that user in this step, okay, the choose step, that is the 0 step, and then I am creating a nested if to check that if step 2 is required. That means before moving to the next step, I make sure that this function or this method returning true. If it is true, only then I updated the current step. Otherwise I want to show user a message. So let's define another method to show message. So here I want to define that method. So the method name is show snack bar, and that method will return nothing. So we defined a message show snack bar where we have to pass the context and the message. So here if step 2 required is false, we want to show a message user that show snack bar, and the message we want to provide is that first we have to pass the context and second the message. Please select a vote fast. So after running, if I now click continue, you see that we are not moving to the next step, rather we are seeing a message, please select a vote fast. Okay, so that's one thing we have done. And another thing we want to do, suppose user click a vote and click continue and come back to the previous screen and click cancel again, but nothing is happening here. But what we want to do, if in this screen user if cancel, then we want to unselect the selected vote. So let's define our on step cancel method. Okay, so here also we need some condition. All right, so now after refreshing, so if I click cancel now, you see the selected option become unselected. So if I click continue, it's not working. So basically we updated our on step continue and on step cancel. Now after we select any vote, if we want to click continue, we need to update this screen. So let's make another widget for this. Now let's create another widget, and in this case the file name is vote.dart, and the widget name will be vote widget. Okay, so before that let's import some library. So our class name or widget name will be vote widget, so that will be a stateless widget. So in the build method, let's retrieve the active vote from the provider state. So vote active. So here in this statement we are retrieving the active vote from our state. Okay, and now what we want to do, that we want to, if you check our service.dart file, you will see that our dummy data or mock data will look like this, that there will be title, vote ID and some options is basically list with map data. Okay, so here basically we define like that way in our model. In our model section, if I open this vote.dart, you will see that here that is defined. So now in the vote widget we want to access all that options. Okay, so let's define a list first, list, and this list contains only string options, and create an empty list. All right, so our empty list is created. Now let's write a for loop. For so here basically in the for loop we are looping active voted option, and if you check our model for that, you will see that this list, this option basically contains a map, that is the key is string and the value is int. We are basically doing that map is string comma int, that is string the key, integer is the value, is the option, is the variable name. Okay, so now let's run another for each for this option, and here define a function. So in this function what we will get a title and value. Okay, and here what we want to do, we want to add those title in this options field. So options dot add title. All right, so this function is done here. Now let's define the widget here. So we do not need basically this container, or we can use the container, that's not a big issue. So here what we need a column. And okay, so card, and in the card there is a child and the child will contain a container widget. And in the container, for the width, okay, I will define the width later. So in the container there is another child property where we want to put a text, and the text will be active vote dot vote title. Okay, every vote has a title, so we want to print that here. And the style will be text style, and here the font size should be 22, font weight should be font weight dot bold, and color should be colors dot teal. Okay, so let's come to the home screen and come here where we are showing just vote content. Remove this thing and type vote widget, and it will automatically import in this file. So here you see that in our vote widget, after we refreshing, that the best web frontend framework is showing. If we go to the previous section and change, select something different like best web backend framework and click continue, you see now it is showing best web backend framework. Okay, but it does not look good, so I want to update some stylings. First I want to give a width. Okay, so here it is basically a card, but the card is smaller, so we want to give some width to it. Okay, so in the container, let's give a width, and there is a class media query where using that you can retrieve device width. So for example, in this case I am just giving this device width, so it looks wider. Okay, basically here in this case, if you after a certain width, that will not be applied here, because stepper widget and step widget has some strict requirement related to their size, so they have a default size. So if you give more than that size, it will not reflect it. But here you can define suppose different kind of value, suppose 500 is also okay. But I think it's good to know that there is a class media query, using that you can retrieve device width. Okay, and now I also want to give some padding. So the padding will be 20. So now you see it looks much better. Now our title is done. Let's create the options here. So here in the after the card, we want to write another loop for string option in options. So this option basically we define in here. Okay, and when you are writing for loop in widget, you cannot use curly braces. That's the rule. So I mistakenly write a curly brace, so I have to remove that. So here we want to use we are using a loop, so we want every option should be in a card. So let's define a card and give a comma. Okay, and now what we want to do, we want to use a raw widget for each card. So write raw, and the raw widget should have some children. Oh sorry, here will be a child, card child. Okay, and the raw widget will have some children, and the children at the first part. So if I open the notability where I create the mockup, so basically when I created this mockup or quick sketch, I just put an radio button, but I do not use radio button. I use a simple color so that it's easy to identify. Our each row has two parts. Okay, so that's why we are using the row. So the first part, let's define a container and give a color. Suppose color is colors.green, and let's save this and open our emulator. Okay, colors.green, and give a width. So width 8. All right, and now let's after this first thing, let's define another part. Okay, so we want to use another container where there will be child and child has a text, and the text will be option, that is we are getting from here, and the max line should be 5, and give some style here as well, text style, font size is 22. Let's save this thing. Now after I save this thing, you see that after hot reload it looks like this, but it doesn't look good, so we need to write some more code to make it beautiful. So here if you notice that first container, basically we give a width and a color, but it is not showing here. So this is because we put two container within a row, and we need to give some height for this container, the first container. So let's give a height using the constraint. So box constraint, I am using box constraint, and I am giving minimum height to 60. If I save this, you see now it looks better. You will get a minimum height. Okay, and now what I want to do here in the second container, I want to give a padding. Okay, so before the child text, let's add some padding. Edge insets only left 10 and right suppose 5. If I save this, now it looks much better than our previous section. And another thing I want to do, suppose in here in the option there is more text, suppose like this, I am writing some more text. Okay, you see it doesn't look good. Okay, and already a yellow line is showing that we over the render engine basically found something over the rendered area, so that's why that kind of thing is error is showing. So to solve this, what we need to do, we have to use an expanded widget. So here in the container, click your mouse and click Alt Enter and wrap a new widget, expanded. If I save this, you see that yellow thing is gone and the text is showing nicely here. So always better when you're creating something, when you using some data, just try to maximize the data with some garbage or something else, like what I did in here. Okay, another thing I want to do, I want to give an alignment here. Alignment is alignment dot center left, so that it looks left center. Okay, so currently it is not showing here, but if suppose some text has suppose option 1 has if some text, suppose one text has 2 lines but another text has 1 line, then this alignment dot center left will try to center left position the text, so it looks better. And now what another thing I want to do is that, now if I go to the previous section and I choose something different, you see it is working. Okay, you have done enough coding. Now take some break, do some exercise and come back later. Now I want to put some more data here. Option plus, suppose I write something more, garbage. And if I save, you see now this green bar doesn't look good, so we need to fix it. So the first thing what we want to do, it's look like it's positioned in the center, but we want to position it from the start. So here in the row, in our row widget, yes, here in our row widget, we want to give a cross axis alignment start, and save this thing. If we give it start from the column side, when you are using row widget and when you use cross axis alignment, that means you are mentioning the column. So when we give it dot start, it is basically position from the top left side. Now it looks like this, but still there are some problems. So to fix this thing, what we need to do, we need to use another widget. So here in the row widget, click Alt Enter and wrap with a new widget and type intrinsic height. If you save this, you see now it looks much better. So if your text is less than like this, then it will be smaller, but if it's more than expected, then it will look like this. So Now you can remove this text part and save this thing. It looks much better. Now if we click this thing, nothing will happen, right? We need to add some interactivity here. So to do that, here in the card, what we want to do, here we are using intrinsic height. Now wrap this widget with another widget. So click wrap with a new widget and type inkwell widget. So inkwell widget, basically we can use the there is a method on tap. So we need to use that on tap. So if I now save this thing and write nothing, and if I click, you see this effect is now showing. So when you define some custom widget but you need this kind of activity, then you can use this inkwell widget. Okay, so now let's define the functionality on tab. So what we want to do, so if after I save this, if I click any of this, so basically our state has a selected option in active vote, this property, right? Selected option in active vote. Using getter we can get, and using setter we can set. So selected option in active vote means when you select a vote like this, when you select a particular vote and when you select an option or mark that option, so this statement basically assign that option to the selected option in active vote. Okay, so basically this is doing this. And now what we need to do, the functionality is working but visually it is not updating because we need to write some more code. So inside this container there is a color property, so here we will write the code. So now when I save this file, you see the selected container looks green. So basically here what we wrote is that this statement basically checking that if the state selected option in active vote has any string or not. If it found any string, then it basically compared that string with this option. Here we are doing a loop, right? So when it match with that option, it's basically use the color green, otherwise make it white. So when we do this, it's working. Okay, so now if I click cancel and come select another like best web framework, click continue, I can see that options for this best web framework, and I can click and do something. And now if I click continue, I think there should be an error or nothing. Okay, so let's define that functionality here as well. So basically our vote widget is also done. So now let's move on our home screen and write some more code. So here if we need to update our on step continue and on step cancel. So after selecting any of the vote, user click continue, we want to move user or redirect user to the result screen. So let's define a result screen in rough. So here in the result screen, we already created a result screen widget. So we have to write the on step continue code here. So here in the on step continue, we want to write else if condition, else if. So basically what I want to do, that if current step equal to 1, that means user in this step, then I need to do something. So before do that, I need to make sure that user already selected any of this vote. If user do not select any of this vote, then I have to I should not move to the result screen. So for this, let's define a method like previous step 2. So here is the step 3 required. So I just copy this thing, and here instead of active vote, I want to type selected option in active vote. So if that is null, then return false, otherwise return true. So here when current step equal to 1, I want to use a nested if else. If step 3 required, then I want to do that I want to redirect user to the result screen, right? So I want to write navigator dot push replacement name context, and route name will be our result page. So I want to do that, and in case step 3 returns false, then what I want to do, I want to show a snack bar, and the message will be please mark your vote. Simple. Alright, now save this thing, and it is showing an analysis issue. Let me see what's problem. Unused import, okay, duplicate import. Anyway, so now model is not using in here, home screen. Anyway, so now if I rerun this program or completely rerun, I sign in, I try to go to the next screen, it is not working, so I select and click continue. I come here, and if I click continue, it is showing that please mark your vote. So suppose I want to mark React and click continue, then I am going to the result screen, which is defined in here. And in the result screen, you see there is a top left corner is a home button. So here you see that home button, icon button we define in our main.dart file, and here if I click home button, it's basically showing result screen, but it should not do like this. We have to update this functionality. So basically when user will click this home button, what we want to do, we want to redirect user to the home screen. So let's write the code. So let's save this, and if I click this home button, it's not working. So let's rerun this program. So if I click home now you go to the home screen again. Here in the home screen, we also need to update on step cancel method. Suppose I click any of the step 1, click any option and click step 2 and mark a board, but if I click cancel, it goes to the previous screen. But if I click continue again, the already selection is selected again, so we need to clear that. So now come to our on step cancel method, and here write code here. After current step less than equal to 0, else if less than equal to 1. So that means first it checks 0 or less than 0, and then it checks 1 or less than 1. So here we want to write that provider.of and let's save this. So after I save this, suppose I select best web front-end framework, click continue, I select suppose React and click cancel, and again I click continue. You see now it's clear. Okay, so suppose I want to change different option, so I click Flutter, click cancel, I come to this page and again click continue. You see that is clear. So our on step cancel method is also done in our home screen. We need to update our result screen page. We want to use a chart. So let me open the web browser, and here in this project repo, you will see there is a charts Flutter, a library and chart gallery. So basically if you go to the gallery, you will see different kinds of charts are available which we can integrate in our application. So for this application I want to use this simple chart, and here in the charts underscore Flutter you will see that there is a library. So we need to install this library first. So come here and copy this charts underscore Flutter and come to your pubspec.yml, and after provider paste it, save it and click packages get. Alright, the library is imported, and now here in the chart, if I click this simple chart, you will see there is a Flutter code available. So if you want to integrate other chart, if you click that, you will see similar Flutter code or Dart code. So I want to integrate this simple Flutter code in our result page. So let's do it. From this page, copy this first line, the first import, and paste it in here in your result screen, and also import provider. then import state and model. Alright, now we need to update our build method. So here inside the container there is a child, right? So in the child we want to call a function create chart, and we want to pass this context, and let's define this create chart function or create chart method. So this create chart will return in widget create chart, and it will take build context as a parameter. So here what we want to return, so if you study this code, you basically you will get the idea that here basically they are returning this chart dot bar chart, this kind of thing. So you just copy this thing, return here charts dot bar chart, and here they have different variable, but what I need to do, I need to define some function for the data. So here I want to show the animation when the chart is showing, and that's why I give it true, and I want to call another function. Okay, that function name will be retrieve board result. So let's write this here. So this function or this method is not defined, so we have to define the method here. So this method will return a list, and here you can get the idea that here you will see that there are a static list method. Basically I copied this method and modified myself, so you will get the idea. Okay, so here what I need to do, charts dot series, you have to return a list charts dot series, and here in the series I need to define a vote data which yet not defined, so I need to define that string and then give the method name return vote result. Okay, and here return vote result curly braces, and let's define a model. So when we want to retrieve that data, we want to model that data for our purpose. So copy this vote data and define a class here. So class vote data, and this data will be final string option final int total, and it will have a default constructor this dot option and this dot total. All right, so basically just open our model. Here you will see that in option we have a key string and a variable integer value. So basically the option is that what the option for that vote and how many people give the vote. In the same data we are storing that. So here in the result screen we defining a class to model that thing. The first part is the option, and the second part or second property is the total, I mean how many people vote this thing. So after doing this, you see that this error is gone from here, and now we need to update that here. So as we are using widget, we need to pass a build context widget here. So we need the context. Okay, anyway, so here now also here in this function retrieve vote result, first we need to, from our state we need to access our active vote. So here let's define a variable vote active vote, and here I want to give listen false. Now I want to define a list of vote data. Now let's write a for loop and loop the options of active vote, and then here write a for each function or for each method where you will get the key and value. And what you need to do, you need to add that data.add and model the data using the vote data class, key and pass the value. Simple. Alright, so our loop is done, and now after this let's write a return statement, and the return will return a list. If you check carefully that this method retrieve vote result basically returns a list. Okay, so here in the return list, first write charts dot series, and here you see there are two types, T and D. So in the first type we want to pass the vote data, and second type we want to pass a string. And here we need to give a ID, so I am giving vote result as the ID, and then there is a function or property color fn. So if you want to know more about this, just put your cursor and click click Ctrl J in your keyboard, then you will get the function signature and some data that how or what the function is doing. So here in the color fn, I do not need the first parameter, so I just need the second parameter. So basically here what we want to do, I want to do a different color for, or two different color for the chart. So if pause, and the pause is basically defining the position for a particular bar. Okay, so here I am doing that if pause mod 2 equal to 0. So for even number, return charts dot material palette dot green dot shadow default. So shade default, sorry. So yes, so if the position is divided by 2, that means if the position is even number, then return this. Otherwise the default would be return charts dot material palette dot blue dot shade default. Alright, now let's define other property. So we need a domain fn property where you have to pass the model data, vote, and the second property we no need, and here we want to pass vote dot option, and measure fn function similarly vote data vote underscore, and this will return vote dot total, and finally data is the data. Alright, so I think our result page is done. So let's run this program. Oh wow, it's working, but it looks you see the full screen is now looks, and the message, the option is showing very bottom and is it not seeing. So we need to give a size for this container. So here in the container, we first want to give some padding, age inset dot all 20, then we want to give the width media query dot of context dot size dot width, and height media query dot of context dot size and height by 2. So we want to use the half height. So if I save this thing, you see now it looks much better. So now let's move from the beginning. So I click the home, I click best any of the tool like best web framework, web front-end framework, click continue. I try to click continue, but it is showing me that please mark your vote. So I select React and click continue again, and I show the mock data. So basically when I clicking any of this vote, it is basically not working. We did not create any functionality to update the result. This is basically a prototype. So when I click continue, we can see the options here and the measure here. So here now let's go to our service.dart file, and here you will see that for the best web backend framework for Django there is 50, Laravel 30. You see this Laravel is showing at the 30 position and Express.js showing at the 50 position. So this is This is now a working prototype, and our result page is also done. And if you do not understand any of this, just try to put your cursor any of that word and click Ctrl Z, then you will get this kind of pop-up to understand the data. So basically these are third-party libraries, so you need a bit time to understand that how this works. So I hope that you created this quick prototype with me and you already understood most of it. But if you have any question, or if you have any confusion, or if you have any suggestion, just please write in the comment section. I will look onto that. And you notice that how much code we need to write to create a simple quick prototype application. So you have to create every logic, you have to define everything, so that takes time. And in the next episode I will show you how to integrate Firebase authentication in the login screen, that is our launch screen. I will also show you how to integrate Firebase Cloud Firestore database so that our user can save data in the server, or in this case in the Firebase server, so that every user who use this application can give their vote and we can see the updated result. So I hope you will stay with me in the next episode as well. If you like this tutorial, please give me a thumbs up, and if you want to get updated tutorial, just please subscribe my channel.